I lived in Boston, worked as a financial analyst at a Fortune 500 company, and shared a downtown apartment with my boyfriend of 3 years, Tyler. We met during my senior year of college, and things moved fast, maybe too fast. After graduation, I landed my dream job, and Tyler moved in with me soon after. I signed the lease on a bigger place because I believed we were building a future together. For a while, everything looked perfect. Steady career, decent relationship, nights out with friends, weekends at home. But life has a way of sneaking up on you when you least expect it. It all unraveled on a Thursday night. One of my closest friends, Madison, was celebrating her birthday. The party was held in a private room at an upscale bar downtown. I remember the laughter, the music, the buzz of conversation, and then I remember what I saw in the hallway by the coat check. A couple, kissing. I don't know what made me stop. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the profile of the man, something about his shoulders, his stance. He shifted just slightly, and my heart stopped. It was Tyler. My Tyler. His hands were all over some blonde I'd never seen before. I froze. The music and voices behind me faded into a dull hum. For a moment, I couldn't move. And then, the rage hit me like a freight train. "Are you kidding me?" I shouted. He jumped like he'd been shocked, spinning around to face me, his eyes wide with panic. "April! Don't you dare say this isn't what it looks like," I snapped. "Because it looks exactly like my boyfriend cheating on me at my best friend's birthday party." He tried to reach for me, blabbering something about going home and talking, but it was too late. Whatever we had was over. "Go home?" I laughed, hollow and shaking. "You mean my apartment? The one I pay for while you live rent-free? Not anymore." I turned and walked out. Madison followed me, put me in a cab, and didn't say a word. That silence was the first kindness I received that night. The crying came later, in the dark, surrounded by the things Tyler left behind. But even in that pain, something shifted. I realized I had nothing tying me to Boston anymore, no real reason to stay. And that's when I remembered the one place that had always been mine. Home. 2 days after the breakup, I sat alone in my apartment, scrolling through old photos and old memories. My mind kept circling back to Hollow Creek, the small town where I grew up. I hadn't been back in years, not really. Just quick visits during the holidays, short enough to smile, nod, and leave before the discomfort set in. But that place, that house, it was different. My father built it with his own hands. A 2-story colonial, blue shutters, wrap-around porch, a swing he hung from the maple tree in our front yard. It wasn't just a building, it was part of him. And when he passed away from cancer during my sophomore year of college, he left it to me in his will. At the time I was 19, overwhelmed with grief and school. I didn't move back. I couldn't. Instead, I let my mother stay there. She was devastated after Dad's death, and when she told me a year later that she was remarrying, I didn't have the heart to argue. His name was Rick. He had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Ella and Jake. I hadn't met them, but they moved into the house. It wasn't easy for me to accept, but I told myself it was temporary, that they'd take care of the place, that it was still mine, just on pause. Now, nearly a decade later, I decided it was time to hit play again. My company had a branch in Albany, just 30 minutes from Hollow Creek. I set up a meeting with my manager, explained everything without going into too much detail, and asked about a transfer. "I'd hate to lose you, Lauren," he said. "But if this is what you need, I'll make the calls." 3 days later, it was official. I'd take a small pay cut, but that didn't matter. The cost of living in Hollow Creek was nothing compared to Boston. That night, I called my mother. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "I've got some news. I'm moving back home. To the house." There was a pause, just long enough for me to hear the hesitation. "Oh," she finally said. "When?" "In about 2 weeks. Just wanted to give you time to get my room ready." Another pause. This one longer. "Well, Ella's been using your room since she started college. She'll need to switch to one of the other rooms," I said, trying to stay calm. "It's still my house, Mom." "Of course," she said quickly. "It's just unexpected. But we'll be happy to have you." But something in her voice told me the opposite. I hung up and stared at the ceiling for a long time that night. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. But I also knew one thing for sure. I was done asking for space in what was already mine. 2 weeks later, I packed up my life into cardboard boxes, sold the furniture that wasn't worth hauling, and said goodbye to Boston. My friends threw me a small farewell party at a quiet little bar, not the one where everything fell apart and Madison hugged me tight. "You deserve peace, Lauren. Go get it." The drive to Hollow Creek took just under 6 hours. I pulled up to the house around sunset. The blue paint was a shade darker than I remembered. The porch railing had some chips. The flower beds were overgrown, but it was still my father's house. As I stepped out of the car, the front door opened. "Lauren," my mom called, walking out with open arms. She looked older, tired, her brown hair now streaked with gray. "Hi, Mom," I said, hugging her lightly. Rick stood behind her, arms crossed, watching me. "Looks like you brought your whole life with you." "Just the essentials," I replied, forcing a polite smile. There was no offer to help carry my bags. "Ella moved her stuff to the guest room," Mom added. "Your old room is ready." Inside, everything looked familiar but off. The furniture was rearranged, photos of Dad were gone, and new decorations filled the space. It wasn't the home I remembered. It was theirs now. Their version. As we passed through the dining room, Ella and Jake came down the stairs. Jake, now 17 and nearly 6 feet tall, nodded politely. Hey, Jake, you've grown." Ella, on the other hand, didn't smile. Arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "So you're actually staying," she said flatly. "Ella," Mom warned. "What? It's not like it's a secret. I had to move all my stuff to that tiny back room." I took a breath. "It's good to see you too, Ella." Dinner that night was quiet but tense. Rick talked about his job at the local bank. Jake scrolled on his phone between bites. Ella stabbed at her salad like it had insulted her personally. So, Rick finally asked, "How long do you think you'll be staying?" "I'm not staying," I said. "I'm moving back. This is permanent." He exchanged a glance with my mother. "Right. Of course. We've just gotten used to certain arrangements around here." "I'm sure we'll all adjust," I said calmly. "I'll be working full-time in Albany." Ella suddenly slammed her fork down. "I had that room for 2 years. My desk, my stuff, everything was set up. Now I'm crammed into a closet." I waited for someone to remind her it was my house. My room. No one said a word. "Actually," I said, keeping my tone steady, "this entire house legally belongs to me. My father left it to me, so I could technically choose any room I want." Ella stood up so fast her chair screeched. "Unbelievable." She stormed off. Mom turned to me, her voice low. "Did you have to antagonize her?" I stared in disbelief. She's the one who's been treating me like a stranger in my own home. And that was just the first night. The next morning, I woke up early and got ready for my first day at the Albany office. The commute was manageable, the team was welcoming, and the work was familiar. I threw myself into it, grateful for something that made sense. But coming home each evening was a different story. There was a tension in the air that never lifted. Ella barely acknowledged me, stomping through the house like I'd stolen something from her. Jake stayed neutral, mostly hiding in his room. Rick offered the occasional forced comment about weather or traffic, and Mom, she tried to pretend everything was normal. But I saw the way her eyes flicked nervously between Rick and me during dinner, how she walked on eggshells every time Ella sighed or slammed a cabinet. I stayed polite, quiet. I ate dinner, washed my plate, and retreated to my room. Some nights, I met up with old high school friends. My best friend Jenna was still in town now working as a nurse, and she became a lifeline. "Still no improvement at home?" she asked over coffee one Saturday. "Nope. It's like I'm some kind of intruder, like I don't belong." "But you do, legally and emotionally. That's your dad's house." I nodded but didn't say what I was really feeling. That maybe the emotional part was harder to prove. A week later, I came home to balloons and streamers scattered across the living room. Ella was decorating with friends, laughing like she hadn't scowled at me every day since I arrived. "What's all this?" I asked, setting my work bag down. "My birthday party," she said flatly, without looking at me. "Cool. Should I get you a gift or something?" She snorted. "No need. You won't be here." Before I could respond, Mom appeared from the kitchen, eyes uncertain. "Lauren, can I talk to you for a second?" She led me to the back porch, once my dad's favorite spot, now cluttered with Rick's tools and forgotten flower pots. Ella's party is on Saturday, she began. She was hoping to have the house to herself for the evening, just for a few hours. I stared at her. You're asking me to leave my own house? Just until the party's over. Maybe have dinner with Jenna. Go to a movie. Mom, I said slowly, I wasn't even invited. And now you want me gone for it too? I'm just trying to keep things from getting tense. I shook my head. Things are already tense because you all treat me like I don't belong here. She flinched but didn't deny it. I'm not leaving. But I won't cause a scene. I'll stay in my room. At dinner that night, Ella made a show of her disappointment. Guess I'll have to move the party to Luciano's, since someone won't compromise. Rick muttered something about how expensive that would be. Mom looked at her plate. I didn't respond. On Saturday, the house was silent. Ella was out, celebrating elsewhere. And for the first time since I'd moved back, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, wrapped in a blanket. The house was mine. But peace still felt like a visitor. Late summer brought a new rhythm. I settled into my role at the Albany branch, took long walks through the neighborhood in the evenings, and even started planting herbs on the kitchen windowsill. But no matter how much I tried to build a sense of normalcy, the weight inside the house never lifted. One evening, after a long day at work, I walked through the front door and instantly felt something was off. The house was unusually quiet. Rick and Mom were seated at the dining table, a neat stack of papers laid out between them. Mom looked up, her voice stiff. Lauren, we need to talk. My stomach tightened. I sat down across from them, glancing at the papers. Utility bills, water, gas, electricity. What's going on? I asked. Rick cleared his throat. Since you moved back, our household expenses have increased. The water bills doubled. The heating's up. We've had to make adjustments. I give you $300 a month for groceries, I reminded them. That covers food, Mom said, but not everything else. I blinked, trying to keep my voice steady. So what are you saying? We think it's fair if you contribute more, Rick said flatly, specifically rent. $1,000 a month. My jaw dropped. You're serious? This isn't about punishing you, Mom chimed in. It's about fairness. We've maintained this house for years. Fairness, I repeated, stunned. You mean the house that I legally own? That Dad left to me? Rick leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, and for 8 years we've paid the property taxes. We fixed the roof. We replaced the water heater. You weren't here. I never asked you to do those things without me, I shot back. I offered to help many times, and Mom always said, we've got it. I trusted you. Mom avoided my eyes. Her silence was louder than anything Rick could have said. So let me get this straight, I continued. You've been living here, rent-free, for almost a decade. You filled the house with people I didn't choose, treated me like a stranger in my own home, and now you want me to pay you rent. If you can't contribute, Rick said, his voice suddenly cold, then perhaps you should find somewhere else to live. The words hit me like a slap. I turned to Mom, waiting for her to step in. To say this had gone too far. To remind Rick that this house was her late husband's gift to me, but she just nodded, eyes downcast, lips pressed tight. I see, I whispered. I stood up and left the room before they could see the tears forming. My bedroom, my supposed sanctuary, felt small and cold that night. The house that had once held my childhood joy, my father's laughter, the scent of Sunday pancakes, now felt foreign. I didn't sleep. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and ran the math in my head. They wanted to talk about fairness. Then maybe it was time to give them a lesson in what that really looked like. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid. I felt clear. By sunrise, the fog in my mind had lifted. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was focused. If they wanted to treat this like a business arrangement, then I would respond like the financial analyst I was trained to be. I started by pulling out the paperwork, my father's will, the property deed. Everything was still in order. The house was in my name and mine alone. I had inherited it at 19, and legally nothing had changed. Every choice I'd made since moving back had been out of consideration for my mother, for the memory of my father, for peace. But they had mistaken my kindness for weakness. Not anymore. That morning, I took a personal day from work and drove into town. I met with a local attorney, Ms. Karen Holt, who came highly recommended by Jenna's cousin. I laid everything out, every document, every detail, every insult. "You have every legal right to reclaim full possession," Karen said, flipping through the pages. "They're occupants, not co-owners. You can serve them formal notice." "Can we do it quietly?" I asked. She nodded. "We'll send certified letters. No need for confrontation, just clarity." 3 days later, the notices were sent. One for Rick, one for my mother, one each for Ella and Jake. 90 days to vacate, no exceptions. When the letters arrived, the house erupted. Rick banged on my door. "You think this is how adults handle things? After all we've done for this place?" Mom cried, "Lauren, please, don't throw us out. We're family." "No," I said, my voice even. "You stopped being family the moment you demanded I pay rent in the house my father gave me. The house you've treated like your own while pushing me into a corner." "Where are we supposed to go?" Mom asked. "You'll figure it out, just like I had to." Ella stormed out without a word. Jake looked confused but didn't argue. And Rick? He muttered curses under his breath, but he packed. It was strange. I'd expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, but I didn't. I just felt calm. 3 months later, the house was quiet. Empty in the best way. I repainted the walls, took down the strange decor, brought back old photos of Dad. Even the smell changed, no more heavy cologne or burnt bacon lingering in the air. Just lemon oil, fresh paint, and clean floors. I sat on the front porch one crisp October morning with a mug of coffee and watched the leaves fall. Jenna pulled up and whistled. Well, look who's finally living like the queen she is." I laughed. For the first time in what felt like forever. It didn't feel forced. "It's not about winning," I told her. "It's about reclaiming what should never have been taken." She raised her coffee in a toast. "To boundaries." "To peace," I added. Because that's what it came down to in the end. I didn't evict them out of spite. I just stopped letting them treat me like a guest in my own life. Life after they left didn't change overnight, but it started to breathe again. The house was quiet now, but not in the cold, silent way it had been before. This was a different kind of quiet. Peaceful. Earned. I could move freely from room to room without walking on eggshells, without worrying about being glared at or talked over. I could make coffee at 6 a.m. without someone sighing loudly. I could sit on the couch, wrap myself in a blanket, and just be. I started adding pieces of myself back into the home. I hung my dad's old fishing rod above the fireplace, right where it used to be. I found a box of photos in the attic, pictures from when I was a little girl, riding on his shoulders, laughing in the garden, and I framed them, placing them on the walls, where generic landscape prints used to hang. I even reopened the attic studio, the space Dad once used for woodworking. I turned it into my reading nook, threw some cushions on the floor, added soft lighting, and stacked the corners with books I hadn't had time to read in years. At work, things were picking up too. My manager told me I was being considered for a team lead position. Apparently they were impressed by how quickly I had adapted and started mentoring new hires. I smiled when he told me. He had no idea the kind of emotional marathon I'd been running outside of work. One Friday evening, I invited Jenna over. We ordered Thai food, sat on the floor in the living room, and played music we loved in high school. "This place finally feels like yours," she said, looking around. "It always was," I replied. "I just forgot that I had the right to claim it." There were still days when I thought about my mom. I missed her in that quiet, aching way you miss someone who's still alive but unreachable. I wish she had stood up for me. I wish she hadn't chosen comfort over me. But I no longer let that ache control my choices. Sometimes people fail you, not because they don't love you, but because they never learned how to put you first. That doesn't mean you let them keep failing you. It means you choose better for yourself. The night ended with Jenna falling asleep on the couch, half covered in a throw blanket, her takeout container still half full. I smiled as I dimmed the lights and tiptoed upstairs. My life was quiet, simple. But it was mine again. And there is something profoundly powerful about reclaiming the space where you were once erased and turning it into the place where you finally begin. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it. If I regret pushing them out. If I regret standing my ground. If I feel guilty for choosing myself over keeping the peace. The truth: I don't. because the peace I was keeping wasn't peace at all. It was silence. It was shrinking. It was enduring when I should have been reclaiming. My father didn't build that house with his bare hands so I could be made to feel like a stranger in it. He left it to me because he wanted me to always have a place where I felt safe, where I could be myself, where I could be respected. And that only became possible when I finally drew the line. I didn't scream. I didn't make threats. I didn't try to prove a point through anger or vengeance. I simply said no. No, I will not pay rent for my own home. No, I will not leave so someone else can celebrate while I hide. No, I will not let you make me small in a space that was built for my future. If you've ever been made to feel like you're asking for too much just by existing, let this be your reminder. You're not wrong for wanting peace. But sometimes the price of peace is boundaries. And those are worth everything. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us here at The Art of Revenge for more